All right. Well, I have been MIA, missing in action for a little bit. I have been traveling. I've started some new work with Concordis Education Services, uh, helping a company that helps new classical Christian schools get started. And then and then I got home from traveling out to a conference, and my computer had updated and none of the things plug in anymore. Well, not none of them, but all of my older equipment doesn't plug in anymore because the drivers don't uh, interact with the new operating system. So I've been my recording station, yeah, was dismantled by the helpful update of Apple, and so now I've got to figure that out. But I have been continuing to think about the mission of God for the family, and read and kind of put together what really is my what really I think is has been centrally important throughout my my wife and my life as parents, is really understanding that our kids are not just for us, right? They're not accessories to our life, but that God has put us on a mission, and then our children are here uh, to receive a mission from the Lord through us and beyond, right? And when beyond us as well, in order to go out and really get hold of and transform the world. And how that has really the more we've come to understand that, the more that we've come to believe it, and it's the deeper it's got within us, the more the better our relationship with our kids has gotten, because we're not trying to get things from them for our own satisfaction, but also it's uh, when our eyes are all up on a mission together. um, there's a kind of fellowship that you don't get any other way. And so, but one of the things, though, so I've been talking quite a bit about discipline and the process of teaching and training and enforcing um, with kids. But one of the things um, that is important to remember in the process of discipline is what it is that we are trying to accomplish. And in Genesis 3:15, one of Eve's promises, or the promise that's given to Eve, is that the serpent's seed will have its head crushed by her seed. And then in First Timothy 2:15, we see that she trusted in the Lord, and that we are supposed to imitate that faith. Um, and so there's an analogous way in which our children are also um, having their heels hardened for the mission of God in their life, right? Their heel is being hardened to be a crusher of the seed of the serpent, right? It's a head. Our children have heels being prepared to walk on serpents. And this is something that the book of Romans reinforces as well. Right? The whole church is in a serpent stomping enterprise, right? That's the marching forward of the church. They is a serpent is from skull to skull to skull as it goes out and crushes the head of the serpent. Jesus says he has come to undo the works of the devil, and then he tells his followers that they're going to go out and complete that work. Well, um, that that understanding is the opposite of a fear-based understanding for our children, right? And that as we discipline our kids, one of the things that we're doing is we are claiming them as our kids, right? You don't discipline the neighbor's kids. You don't discipline random kids you see on the street, right? You discipline your kids. You're claiming them as your kids. And as you claim them as your kids, you're bringing them into the mission that God has you on and out of the fear of the world, because our mission is a mission that the Holy Spirit has promised is going to be completed by the church, right? We're going to go out and we're going to push back the the demonic influence in the world, and we're going to bring in uh, fellowship with the Lord corporately as a people, right? That's what the church does. When the church goes out, the church preaches the gospel, the church gathers together, the church sings, the church worships, the church renews covenant with the Lord, and the church is blessed, and that blessing flows into the church, out into the world, and it flows out in a way that really affects the world, undoes the world, and that flowing out in the present looks like families, individuals, families, people going out from worship, having eaten with Christ in communion, having taken on that a greater family resemblance, taking the smell of the family out into the world, and to transform it. And children are a big part of what that is, right? They are a big part of God's mission for the world to transform it, because it's transformed by faith, and they are our as we teach them, they in turn teach us what faith looks like, right? Jesus says that they are our models for faith, and so we model for them maturity, they model for us a childlike faith. So that's going to be a really important part of going out and transforming the world by faith on the mission that God has put us on, to bring the to bring the garden that we experience in the presence of God, the garden that we experience when we come into the presence of God, because Christ is the tree of life, and He feeds us on the tree of life, right? We come in, we're transformed by God, and then we go out to transform the world, right? To bring the world to its intended end, to take dominion. Well, that bringing our kids into that is what discipline is doing, right? We're not just teaching them to not annoy us, right? We're not just training them to do the things that we want them to do, right? We're teaching them, we're training them how to follow God's word, how to follow God's commands, how to live according to reality, right? How to live according to the way God built the world. And that broader vision is a fear destroying vision, right? So when Galatians 6 tells us, you who are spiritual, um, correct the one who's fallen into sin, that you who are spiritual isn't you guys who are uh, afraid of the world and trying to make sure that we're separate from the world because we're going to get some of it on us, right? It's you who are spiritual, you who are walking in the spirit. Well, that spirit is the spirit that raised Jesus from the dead, right? That spirit is the spirit uh, who declared Jesus before the watching world to truly be the Son of God by the resurrection of the dead. And then that resurrection power is what we are living in and walking in, right? There's no more death to fear, and the only power that the world has is death, right? When Christ takes away our guilt, we cease to fear death. When Christ takes away our shame, we cease to fear death. Christ takes away our fear of death, and then we no longer fear the world. We are disciplining our children into that, right? We are teaching, and we are training, and correcting our children into that fearless mission, into that fearless forward facing mission that says, well, the world has been overcome by Christ. I am Christ's. Now let's go out and bring the love of God to the world. Let's go out and bring the mercy of God to the world. Let's go out and bring a true description of what it means to live according to reality, right? Bring the scriptures to the world so that they can experience this fellowship with God that we have, so that they can experience what it is to worship the Lord the way uh, we were intended to, and to then be brought into the feast, brought into the party that is every Sunday at the Lord's Supper. When I travel, I tend, if I ever have to fly on a Sunday, I try to avoid it, but sometimes you have to. I always find an a church close to the airport and go before church, and I've have just, dropped into great little kind of community Baptist churches that I've worshipped at a really wonderful small neighborhood Anglican church this last Sunday. The I knew it was going to be a great. I knew I was going to enjoy it when little a little old lady comes up, and I say, "Oh, what's this? Tell me a little bit about the church." And the first thing she said is, "Well, when the Episcopalians decided they could start ordaining women, we left." Right. So she'd been there since, I believe, the 70s, and had helped found this church as the Anglican Church was veering away from, or the Episcopalian Church was veering away from the scriptures. And it was a wonderful little neighborhood church. And in those moments, or in those times, you get to see what a blessing it is um, to uh, to be a part of God's people, right? So this another great Baptist church in Arkansas that I worshiped at, go in, and the the um, the pastor's wife turned out to have been discipled by the same man I was in the same church about a few years before I was a Christian in Spokane. Right, we were discipled by the same just gentleman who's a lawyer who has discipled lots and lots of people, and it was amazing to see, to just run into somebody and immediately have fellowship around the world. The church is a worldwide institution that is transforming the world, right? And you get to see it in all sorts of different places when you travel around. Well, what we want is kids that understand and are brought up into that worldwide mission through, and that the discipline is aimed in our homes is aimed at that, right? We claim our children with discipline, right? Hebrews 12 tells us that claim our children with discipline. And then but we're not just claiming our children to ourselves. We're claiming our children to the mission of God. And all of the work, and so it's a lot of work to raise kids. It's a lot of work to teach kids. It's a lot of work to train kids. All of that work is worth it when you remember the larger and broader mission, right? Because as long as you're doing um, as long as you're doing uh, discipline for selfish reasons, you will just continually run out of uh, motivation, right? You aren't important enough to be continually motivated in hard things. So when selfishness runs out of motivation, because the reality is, just as an individual, I'm not important enough. But the the if you can see in your kids the possibilities of their life, plus the possibilities of their children, their children's children, their children's children's children, right? That the growing influence that this child is going to have on the whole world over time, then you won't run out of motivation, right? If you love the world that God made, if you love the human race, and you want to see the human race transformed into who God intended it to be, then every time that you see your kid stumble and fall, and you get to be the one that corrects them, um, you get to be the one that is walking in the spirit and correcting them. You won't run out of motivation when you see how uh, how large of an influence your child has. And it's not if your child is going to have a large influence. Your child will have a large influence because your child is a generational chain, right? It's a generational fountainhead. So all of that influence that your child is going to have is is brought into line with the mission of God to bring the world to fruitfulness through consistent teaching, training, correcting, forgiving, consistent teach, train, correct, forgive. That consistency is transforming your child into someone who becomes a world transforming, a generationally world transforming uh, person made in the image of God. So it's good to be back and excited to be uh, recording again, and hopefully I'll have my nicer camera, the driver for my nicer camera updated soon. So